What if I told you that Senjumaru is a literal god, and not in the metaphorical way that the common Shinigami of Bleach are considered to be the gods of death? I mean, she's a literal kami from the ancient days of the Bleach cosmos. Let me explain. Now, let's start off with the facts. Senjumaru Shutara is a member of the Soul King's Royal Guard, known as the Divine General of the North and the Great Weaver. Like all members of the Royal Guard, she contributed something that was integral to the history of Soul Society, and in her case it was the Shihakusho that is worn by the Shinigami. The uniform that has been worn by the Soul Reapers for at least 2,000 years. 1,000 years before the founding of the Gotei 13. So, at a minimum, we know she comes from a long time before the creation of the Gotei 13. However, we are also told by Kubo that in the past, there was a group that was similar to the Shinigami Research and Development Institute, and that Mayuri served under Senjumaru in that organization. And lastly, we are told by Kubo that the color of the Shihakusho worn by the Shinigami was in fact decided during the days of the first Gotei generation. So here are the important nuances of those facts. The answer regarding the Gotei has two very important word choices, both from the question and the answer. The questioner asked about the color of the Shinigami uniform specifically, not the design of the Shihakusho in general, which will become important later on. And when Kubo replies, he does not name the Gotei 13, he names the Gotei, and like I've discussed in my more recent videos, that is a very important distinction, as the court guards in general, before they were restructured into the 13 divisions, led by Zanpakuto-wielding captains, have existed for generations before the time of head captain Yamamoto. And so, by answering in this way, Kubo has sneakily left the answer up in the air as to what era the Shihakusho was created in. Now, in regards to the answer about Mayuri, some people have tried to suggest that this means that Senjumaru's time came after the founding of the Gotei 13. But this claim doesn't make much sense. We know Mayuri is a brilliant mind who has an endless desire for knowledge, and he is a scientist who focuses on body modification, and his core body modifications were already present when he was in Maggot's nest. Now, the first thing a body modding scientist like Mayuri would do in my eyes, when he reached the end of his biological prime, would be to find a way to sustain his youth, so that he may pursue his research indefinitely. So when we combine this with the fact that the Maggot's Nest prisoners are inherently innocent, yet extremely dangerous, it becomes clear that Mayuri was likely imprisoned after Senjumaru left the Seirete to take up permanent residence in the royal realm, due to there no longer being an authority figure who had the intellect and power to keep him in line. So we know that, at a minimum, Senjumaru has been in the royal realm for around 2,000 years, and Kubo left his answer open-ended as to whether or not the creation of the Shihakusho could have been generations before Yamamoto's time. So now we can begin to dig into the topics where things start to get very interesting, starting with an analysis of Senjumaru's name. The name Senjumaru can be translated to thousand-hand perfection or thousand-hand completion, and is based off of the female Buddhist deity Senju Kannon, who is known as the goddess of mercy, and who through syncretism is also Kannon Bosatsu, or Guanyin Bodhisattva. And if you're a fan of Hunter x Hunter, you'll have recognized that last name already, and know that these beings are famous for having 1,000 hands. And what is Senjumaru known for in the eyes of Kiryu Hikifune? Having 1,000 hands. However, the allusions to divinity don't stop there, as Senju Kannon is synonymous with the Shinto primordial goddess Izanami, half of the last pair of primordial gods to emerge, the wife of Izanagi. Now, these beings were the last primordials to emerge, when the chaotic world began to solidify and calm. Before them came other deities, beings closer to the birth of the world, such as the 5 primordial gods of the first generation, the Koto Amatsukami, which closely mirror the 5 primordial ancestors of the noble clans in my eyes. And we know if Senjumaru were to actually be synonymous with her namesakes, she would still be younger than entities like Ichibei Hyosube and the Noble Founders, who existed well before the end of the Primordial Era, and she would have been created at the same time as beings like the Mimihagi and Pernida. Now, in the belief of Izanagi and Izanami, it is established that they pulled the first land out of the primordial sea with a heavenly spear. And while it's not a spear, what do we see when we get the vision of Adonais shaping the worlds? He pierces the primordial sea with his blade, and that is the trigger for the creation of the triplet worlds. Now, when the Rhea was swept up when the worlds are separated, by his completing of the ritual, we get some very key visual details. His arms, who would go on to become divine beings in their own right, as well as his legs and his sword, fall from the heavens. I believe that just like the arms of Rhea, in this moment, the blade of Rhea would go on to become a being that we all know well. In a mirror to his own creations, I believe that Owetsu ni Maya is the being who was once the spirit weapon of Adonais, an entity who was given a name, and therefore a form by Ichibei Hyosube after the Reo split the worlds. And just like Izanagi, who wielded the blade that ended the primordial world, Owetsu ni Maya himself was the blade that pierced the primordial sea. Now, you may be thinking that I'm going to say I believe Senjumaru is one of the legs of the Soul King, but in actuality, I believe she is actually the spiritual clothing of the Soul King. Let me explain. You see, Adonais was clothed when he performed the ritual that shaped the worlds. And as we know from Senjumaru's Oken clothing, Soul King infused clothing is extremely special, and is the greatest armor in the three worlds. So just imagine the power held in his personal robes. And this is where the distinction on the Shihakusho I mentioned earlier becomes important. You see, when a soul separates from their body, they are clothed, and Shinigami naturally manifest a black Shihakusho, and when they lose their powers, their Shihakusho becomes white. Now, we are never shown, but it is highly unlikely that Rukongai citizens emerge naked. Rather, they emerge with the clothes that we see them wearing. I believe that this concept also applies to primordial beings, and they emerged fully clothed. And so Adonais' robes were not just clothes, but rather an aspect of his soul. And the Soul King's robes, much like the clothes of Rukongai citizens, I believe are Shihakusho. And the word Shihakusho specifically is a name that means death-conquering robes, a name that doesn't inherently just apply to Shinigami. You see, the Soul Society isn't the land of the dead, it's the land of spirits. Human souls who die can stay in the world of the living until the Kanso is performed. And when Shinigami die, their souls can remain in a state of limbo for years. So when a human dies and makes it to the Soul Society without becoming a hollow, they have successfully conquered death and reincarnated. And so they are reincarnated into the Soul Society with death-conquering robes, the various patterned Shihakusho we see Rukongai citizens wearing. And this title to the clothing would also apply to Adonais, the being who emerged to avoid the metaphorical death of the universe through stagnation. So what I am proposing is that Senjumaru's creation of the Shihakusho was not actually within living memory, just like Owetsu, who under this theory is the first sentient blade, would go on to mimic his own existence with his creations. Senjumaru, the robes who once guarded the Soul King like armor, that were made into a divine being through the powers of the monk, would go on to mimic her own existence and create the garb that is an intrinsic part to every soul. And when the court guards were founded, using her connection to all Shihakusho, she altered the inherent appearance and color of the Shihakusho worn by all those with Soul Reaper powers to denote them as balancers. And then her surname, Shutara, meaning master of many silks, also reinforces this theory. Let me explain. You see, not only do we have indications that the native garb of all souls are in fact Shihakusho, we also have another aspect of spiritual powers that connects Senjumaru to every living being. Do you remember the spirit ribbons? Because I do. These ribbons are the manifestation of the spiritual powers of all souls, including soul reapers. Ribbons, as in narrow strips of fabric. If only we knew of a godlike figure in the soul society who was connected to the concept of weaving spiritual fabric. And the spirit ribbons of Shinigami are red. Now let's think, does Senjumaru have an affinity for the color red? Like maybe her woven red umbrella that she used to fight Uryu? Or maybe the giant red carpet that's central to her damn Bankai? Guys, the imagery here can't get any more clear. Not only does Senjumaru weave the Shihakusho that clothe all souls naturally, she is also the source of the spirit ribbons. She is a literal goddess connected to the functions of souls. And I actually left one thing out of the story of Izanami. She is the first divine being to technically die and go to the underworld, called Yomi, the pitch-black land of the dead, which became her domain. And if Senjumaru is indeed synonymous with Izanami, is there perhaps anything that connects the two beings who would call Yomi their domain? Maybe something like a ritual that contains the divine power of the Soul King, a path to Buddhist enlightenment, containing Japanese torii gates, hidden in a realm of pure darkness, surrounded by the essence of death? Something like, I don't know, the Arazu Sando ritual realm that is opened by Senjumaru and ends in her palace? Guys, this is so on the nose, I don't even know if I can call this a theory anymore. And then there's the famous statement from Aizen and the lore surrounding the Shohoin clan. You see, we know for a fact that when Aizen said, "No one has ever filled the vacant throne in heaven, not you, nor I, nor the gods," he was referring to Mimihagi within Ukitake when he addressed him, and refers to multiple gods. And to me, those gods are obvious. The noble ancestors, Ichibei Hyosube, the sword god, and Senjumaru Shutara. And then we have the rabbit hole that is the Shohoin clan, the Tenshi Haisobin, the defenders of the realm. They are said to have been given the Hogu and the Bugu, the heavenly arms and armaments, by the gods on behalf of the Soul King generations ago, which would place their gifting before the time of Kiryu Hikifune and Tenjiro Korinji, again reinforcing that the three core members of the Royal Guard, the vassals of Ryo, are considered gods. Now there's just one problem. If Senjumaru was a goddess who created the Shihakusho at the dawn of the Triplet Worlds and the Cycle of Souls, why was she not elevated to Squad Zero until many thousands of years later? Well, here's what I think. I think that before the creation of the Gotei 13, the Royal Guard inherently was not called Squad Zero, and that the custom of Royal Guard members contributing an invention integral to the Soul Society is something that emerged after the creation of the Gotei, a requirement that mimics the status of Ichibei, Oetsu, and Senjumaru. During that ancient time, Senjumaru, who was in charge of maintaining the royal realm's barriers, likely also maintained the barriers of Soul Society and the Seirete, as well as regulated any attempts to travel to the royal realm by Seirete residents. During such time, she likely acted as Ryo's representative within the spirit court, acting as a figure who could act with authority beyond even the heads of the noble clans, so long as they were not united. During her tenure in the Seirete, she would found an organization to progress the Soul Society and assist her in maintaining and evolving the various barriers and technological means of the Seirete. However, when Oetsu perfected the Asauchi and distributed them amongst the court guards and other Soul Reapers, and a being as powerful as Yamamoto became the Seirete's protector and became commander of the court guards, there was no longer a reason for her to stay within the Seirete, so she left her laboratory in the hands of a successor, someone Mayuri likely refused to follow, leading to his incarceration, and she finally permanently joined her primordial counterparts in the royal realm. Now, during these early days of Yamamoto's reign would have been when Tenjiro Korinji revolutionized Kido and created the art of Kaido, becoming the first newly appointed royal guard in history. And when the court guards were reformed into 13 divisions under Yamamoto, the royal guard would take the honorary designation as Zero Division, the first group of guards, literally, in the history of the world, those who have always protected the Reo. And now there's one last thing I want to bring up, and that's this infamous statement from Rangiku claiming that the Soul Society has a royal family, not just a king. And everyone has always wrote this off to be a common myth of Soul Society residents, because the Reo is so mysterious even to the Shinigami. However, what if it's just a fact? There are only 2 known mentions of Shinigami royalty aside from the Soul King, and that's the aforementioned quote from Rangiku, and the classification of Yoruichi when she was the Shohoin clan head as a princess, where she is also wearing a crown-like headdress. Remember, this is the same clan who was gifted arms and armaments by the gods, and who are called the Defenders of the Realm, and who is the only other Shinigami character to wear a crown-like headdress, one much larger and more ornate than even the Shohoin crown. Well, it's Senjumaru, of course. Now, not only are the Shohoin and Senjumaru the only known instances of royal headwear in the Soul Society, the crescent moon is also clearly a feature of Senjumaru's crown. And what is featured at the heart of the Shohoin clan insignia? A goddamn crescent moon. The Shohoin clan insignia that shows 4 maple leaves surrounding the moon, which I suspect is meant to mirror the 4 noble clans who remained in the Seirete. The crescent moon on their crest represents Senjumaru. To me, it's clear at some point the Shohoin clan did something to gain the favor of Reo, and so they were elevated to the status of the Tenshi Haisobin, which is why they are the only clan given permission to call themselves royalty, and why they defend the realm with treasures gifted to them by the royal guard. Now, if Senjumaru was once the Shihakusho of the Reo, the same clothes that would later denote a spirit or Shinigami, the robes that are a fragment or aspect of Adonais' soul, that would essentially make her the Soul Reaper equivalent to Yuha, the offspring of Reo who embodies the Soul King's Quincy powers, the man who is called the son of the Soul King, making it logically consistent that Senjumaru is, in a way, the daughter of the Soul King, the crown princess of the Soul Society. And despite never having a clear moment in lore where they could have met, Senjumaru tells Yuha that it's been a long time, which would make sense if they were both once aspects of Adonais. They were once, technically, the same being, almost like Adonais' version of Zangetsu and Old Man Zangetsu, though not quite. So, to close out this theory, here's a summary. Senjumaru Shutara is a literal goddess. She is the being humans would come to know as Senju Kanin, Kanin Bosatsu, Guanyin Bodhisattva, and Izanami no Mikoto. She is the spiritual garb of the Soul King, given name and form as a Shinigami by Ichibei, a goddess born alongside the creation of the 3 realms. She is the Soul King's Shinigami aspect, the being whose power controls the entryway to the everlasting power of Reo, hidden within what is likely the inner realm of Ichibei Hyosubei. She is the crown princess of the Soul Society, the Great Weaver, Senjumaru Shutara. As always, thank you for watching, and let me know what you thought of the theory down in the comments.